The vibration of the thrust engines hummed through the floorboards of the driftwood, a sensation Arlen Shaw had known for 20 years. It was a rhythm that usually lulled him into a state of professional detachment. But today, the shuttle felt less like a graceful bird of prey and more like a tin can rattled by a cosmic wind. Arlen adjusted his grip on the yoke, his leather gloves creaking softly. He was 42 years old, and on days like this, he felt every single minute of those years settling into the stiffness of his lower back. "Please, keep your claws retracted, little one," Arlen called out over his shoulder, his voice dry but lacking genuine heat. "That synthetic leather on the seatback costs more than my entire fuel budget for the week." In the passenger row behind him, a young Filieri kit, a feline humanoid no taller than Arlen's waist, froze mid-scratch. The kit's large triangular ears swiveled forward, guilt written all over his whiskered face. Beside him, his mother, a sleek Filieri, with leopard-spotted fur, gave an apologetic hiss that translated roughly to a human sigh of embarrassment. "Sorry, pilot," she purred her common tongue, heavily accented. "He is excited for the festival. The lights make him twitchy." "Twitchy is fine," Arlen muttered, banking the shuttle gently to the left as the massive silhouette of Lumenspire came into view. "Shredding my upholstery is a felony in this vessel. Just a friendly warning." He winked into the rearview mirror, and the kit giggled, retracting his needle-sharp claws. Arlen turned his attention back to the viewport. Ahead of them, Lumenspire hung in the void like a jeweled crown, spinning around a pale, artificial moon. It was a masterpiece of interspecies, engineering a sprawling ring station where gravity was a suggestion and commerce was the religion. The spire was the heart of the sector, a place where human ambition, Lucan strength, and Nyxari elegance collided in a chaotic, beautiful mess. And right in the center of the artificial moon that the station orbited lay the moon gate, the source of the lunar flux, the mysterious energy that powered their civilization and occasionally haunted Arlen's nightmares. "Approaching Docking Bay 7, Arlen spoke into the comms, his voice shifting to his professional register. "Lumenspire Control, this is Shuttle Driftwood requesting clearance for commercial drop-off." "Copy, Driftwood," the traffic controller's voice crackled back. It sounded like a Draken deep and gravelly. "You are clear. Watch your vector. The flux is reading a little high today. Keep your shields up." "Understood," Arlen replied. He tapped a gauge on his dashboard that had been stuck on the red line for 3 months. "Shields are optimistic." He guided the ship through the atmospheric shield of the dock with the practiced ease of a man who could park an asteroid in a broom closet. As the landing struts hissed and locked onto the deck, Arlen exhaled a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Another flight, surviving another 50 credits in the bank. It was barely enough to cover the docking fees and a hot meal, but it was enough to keep him flying. And flying meant he did not have to stay still long enough to think. After the passengers disembarked, the Filieri mother, leaving a generous tip of 5 credits for the no shredding advice, Arlen secured the cockpit. He threw his worn flight jacket over his shoulder and stepped out into the chaotic humidity of Lumenspire. The air here always smelled of ozone frying oil and exotic perfumes. It was the Lunar Bloom Festival, the time of year when the moon gate emitted wave after wave of harmless iridescent light, bathing the station in colors that did not exist on any natural planetary spectrum. The promenade was packed. Arlen wove through the crowd a solitary figure in drab pilot grays, amidst a sea of colorful robes and bioluminescent accessories. He passed a group of Nyxari aristocrats, their skin pale as alabaster, sipping glowing red liquid from crystal flutes. They moved with a fluid grace that made Arlen feel clumsy and solid. Further down, a family of Draken massive-scale dragonkin sat around a heating vent sharing a bowl of what looked like burning coals. They ate the heat with relish, smoke curling from their nostrils. Arlen kept his head down, his eyes scanning the crowd, but never lingering. He was looking for one thing, only caffeine. Not the synthetic sludge from the dispensers on his ship, but the real thing. He ducked into a side alley on Deck 4, pushing past a hovering advertisement drone that tried to sell him scale polish for the modern gentleman, and found his sanctuary, the Silver Steam Cafe. It was a small establishment, squeezed between a heavy-gravity gym for Lucans and a zero-gravity meditation chamber for the Faliri. The Silver Steam was one of the few places on the Spire that understood the human need for hot bean water. The bell above the door chimed a digital approximation of a brass bell as Arlen stepped inside. The noise of the festival faded instantly, replaced by the hiss of steam wands and the clatter of ceramic. The place was busy. Arlen joined the queue behind a towering cyborg who was ordering engine oil with a shot of espresso. Pilot Shaw, the barista, greeted him when he finally reached the counter. He was a Faliri named Kale, with fur the color of storm clouds and a permanent expression of mild disdain for anyone who ordered decaf. The usual, or are you feeling adventurous enough to try the sulfur blend the Draken keep asking for? Just the cacao Kale, Arlen said, leaning his hip against the counter. Dark, hot enough to melt the regrets of yesterday. And keep the whipped cream coming until your hand gets tired. Kale's whiskers twitched in amusement. Rough flight. Just a long life. Arlen quipped, his smile crooked. Put it on my tab. I promise I am good for it. I just dropped off a family of tourists who tipped me enough to buy a small moon. Or a sandwich. Tab is getting heavy, Arlen, Call warned, though he was already punching the order in. 700 credits. My manager is starting to ask if you are a pilot or a squatter. I am a patron of the arts, Arlen retorted. And your cacao is the art. Arlen stepped aside to wait for his drink, intending to find a quiet corner to brood in peace. However, the universe rarely gave Arlen what he intended. Standing near the pickup counter was a child. She was small, perhaps 10 or 11 years old in human terms. She wore a slightly oversized hooded tunic that looked like it had been patched multiple times. But it was her features that caught Arlen's attention. 2 triangular fur-covered ears poked out from beneath the hood, swiveling nervously. A long, bushy tail was tucked anxiously around her leg. A Lucan, a wolf child. She was staring up at the floating holographic menu, which was cycling rapidly between 6 different languages and 3 different currencies. Her hands were clenched in front of her, and her posture screamed of someone who was terrified of taking up space. Next, another barista, a harried human woman, barked from the other end of the counter. The girl jumped, her tail fluffing up in surprise. She looked at the barista, then back at the menu, her golden eyes wide with panic. I, the girl stammered. Her voice was soft, barely audible, over the hiss of the espresso machine. I want the sweet one. Which sweet one? The barista sighed, wiping a rag across the counter. We have 20 sweet ones. Honey-glazed plasma sugar blood syrup for the vampire crowd. Come on, kid, the line is backing up to the airlock. The girl shrank back, her ears flattened against her skull. Arlen felt a familiar tug in his chest, a phantom pain from a life he had buried 6 years ago. He knew that look. He knew the body language of a Lucan who felt cornered. And more than that, he knew what it was like to be a child, overwhelmed by the noise of the spire. Before his common sense could tell him to mind his own business, Arlen stepped forward. He moved smoothly, placing himself between the girl and the impatient crowd, creating a small buffer of personal space. He crouched down, ignoring the pop of his knee joint, until he was eye level with the girl. He did not look at her directly. Staring was considered aggressive in Lucan culture, but instead focused on the menu. Those floating letters are a pain, aren't they? Arlen said, his voice dropping to a low, rumbling register that he knew was soothing to Lucan ears. They switch languages faster than I can blink. The girl glanced at him, startled. Her golden eyes assessed him, looking for a threat. She saw a tired human man with grease under his fingernails and a smile that looked like it had been broken and glued back together a few times. "It keeps changing," she whispered. "I know," Arlen agreed. "Listen, if you want sweet, you have two main choices here. Do you want the kind of sweet that makes your teeth hurt for 3 days? Or do you want the kind of sweet that makes you feel like you are wrapped in a warm blanket on a cold night?" The girl blinked. The tension in her shoulders dropped by 50%. A small, tentative smile touched her lips, revealing slightly pointed canines. "The blanket one?" she decided. Arlen looked up at the harried barista. "1 moondust cocoa, extra foam, warm not scalding, and put a cinnamon stick in it. Lucans love the crunch." The barista rolled her eyes, but nodded. "Fine. That will be 12 credits. The girl fumbled with a small pouch at her belt, her fingers trembling. She pulled out a handful of mismatched coins credits from 3 different sectors. Some of them so old, they were practically artifacts. "I have money," she insisted, trying to count. "Put it away," Arlen said gently. He stood up and looked at the barista. "Put hers on my tab, too." "Arlen," Kyle called out from the other machine warningly. 712 credits now. Yeah, I will sell a kidney." Arlen waved him off. While they waited for the drinks, the girl looked up at him. She was studying him with an intensity that made Arlen want to check if his fly was down. "Thank you," she said. "My mom says I am supposed to be able to do these things by myself. She says I have to be brave." "Being brave does not mean you cannot ask for help," Arlen said, leaning against the counter. "I fly ships through asteroid fields for a living, and I still ask for help when I cannot open a jar of pickles." The girl giggled. It was a bright, chirping sound that cut through the gloom of Arlen's mood. "Here you go." Kale slid 2 steaming mugs across the metal counter. "1 moondust, special 1, dark despair for the pilot." "It is not despair, it is character," Arlen corrected, reaching for his mug. As he reached out, the biometric scanner on the counter beeped red. "ID required for tab increase." "Blast it," Arlen muttered. "Sensors are finicky today." He acted without thinking. It was a muscle memory, a reflex. He pulled off his left glove, the worn leather, peeling away to reveal his hand. He needed skin contact for the sensor to recognize his DNA and authorize the debt. He slapped his palm on the scanner panel. The machine chimed green. But as he pulled his hand back to slide the glove back on, he froze. The girl was staring at his hand. Specifically, she was staring at his ring finger. There, resting on the 3rd finger of his left hand, was a band of heavy, tarnished silver. It was not a delicate piece of jewelry. It was thick, industrial, and etched with the intricate snarling visage of a wolf interwoven with geometric circuitry patterns. It was a piece of Lucan craftsmanship, heavy with history and heavier with memory. It was an anchor ring. Arlen's heart hammered a sudden, violent rhythm against his ribs. He moved to cover it, to slide the glove back on and hide the evidence of a life he had left behind, but he was too slow. The girl's eyes were wide, her pupils dilated. She reached into her tunic and pulled out a small, battered hollow frame. With a shaking thumb, she pressed the activation stud. A blue hologram flickered into existence between them. It was a grainy image, perhaps taken 10 years ago. It showed a towering Lucan male, broad-shouldered and grinning with a ferocity that was all joy. He was holding up a wrench in one hand, and his other arm was draped around a laughing human woman. But on the Lucan's hand, the hand holding the wrench, was a ring. Silver, heavy, wolf motif. It was identical to the one on Arlen's finger. Arlen felt the blood drain from his face. He recognized the Lucan in the hologram. He would recognize that grin in the dark, in a sandstorm, in hell itself. Rhett. The girl looked from the hologram to Arlen's hand, and then up into his face. The innocence in her expression was gone, replaced by a sharp, piercing confusion. "Why?" She started, her voice trembling. The noise of the cafe seemed to drop away, leaving them in a silent bubble of confrontation. Why do you wear my dad's ring?" The question hit Arlen like a physical blow to the solar plexus. He stopped breathing. My dad. He looked at the girl, really looked at her. He saw the shape of her jaw, the stubborn set of her brow. He saw Rhett. It was undeniable. This was Rhett's daughter. Arlen's voice failed him. His throat felt like he had swallowed broken glass. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his system. He could not do this. He could not have this conversation in a coffee shop with a child he did not know, about a man he had loved and lost and failed. He forced a smile onto his face. It felt brittle like cracked plaster. This, Arlen lifted his hand, feigning a casual air that he absolutely did not feel. "Oh, this is just, you know how it is. Cheap jewelry shops. They probably made 10,000 of these. It is a popular design. Wolves are very trendy." It was a terrible lie. It was a clumsy, insulting lie, and he knew it the moment it left his mouth. The girl did not buy it. Her ears flattened further. She looked hurt. "No. My mom said it was one of a kind. She said Dad made it." "Well," Arlen said, sliding his glove back on with desperate haste, hiding the silver band from view. "Memories can be tricky things, kid. Sometimes we remember things being more unique than they really are." He grabbed his cocoa. He needed to leave. He needed to run. It was what he was best at. "Enjoy your drink," Arlen said, his voice tight. "Stay safe, okay?" But before he could turn away, the ground beneath them lurched. It wasn't an earthquake. Lumenspire was floating in space. It didn't have tectonic plates. It was a vibration of the air itself, a deep, resonant thrum that rattled the cups on the shelves and made the teeth in Arlen's skull ache. The lights in the cafe flickered. The liquid in Arlen's cup didn't just slosh. It rose up in the center, forming a defying gravity peak before splashing back down. A flux tremor, a wave of instability from the moon gate. Most people in the cafe gasped or grabbed their tables. The Faleri barista hissed, but Arlen felt it differently, because of the ring. The silver band under his glove suddenly grew hot, searing against his skin. He felt the surge of energy, the chaotic wild scream of the lunar flux, channeling through the metal. It was a connection he hadn't used in 6 years, a dormant nerve ending suddenly setting fire to his arm. He knew what was happening. The stabilizers on the gate were slipping. If someone didn't ground the charge, the tremor would escalate. A pipe might burst. A gravity generator might fail. Someone could get hurt. Arlen didn't think. The instinct of a star-warden pilot, buried under years of cheap whiskey and cargo runs, kicked in. He slammed his gloved left hand down onto the metal counter. To the onlookers, it looked like he was just steadying himself against the shake. But under the leather, Arlen pushed his will into the ring. He visualized the chaotic wave of energy and caught it. He felt the flux roar, in his mind a torrent of white noise. He gritted his teeth, sweat popping on his forehead, and visualized a heavy anchor dropping into a stormy sea. "Steady," he commanded silently. "Hold." The ring burned. The energy traveled up his arm, making his nerves sing with pain, and then he grounded it, dispersing the excess charge harmlessly into the station's heavy metal frame. The tremor stopped instantly. The lights buzzed and returned to full brightness. The coffee settled in the cups. Arlen exhaled, his breath shaky. He kept his hand pressed to the counter for a second longer, waiting for the heat in the ring to fade. When he looked up, the cafe was returning to normal. People were laughing nervously, blaming the old generators or a passing cargo ship. No one had noticed what he had done. No one except the girl. Mira was staring at his hand, the gloved hand pressed against the counter. She hadn't looked away. She had seen him flinch. She had seen the way the air seemed to distort around his fist for a split second. She looked up at his face again, and the suspicion in her golden eyes had deepened into something solid. She wasn't just a confused kid anymore. She was a detective who had just found the smoking gun. "Who are you?" she whispered. Arlen pulled his hand back as if the counter were red hot. He grabbed his cocoa, turned on his heel, and walked toward the door. "Just a pilot, kid," he threw back over his shoulder, his heart racing faster than his engines ever could. "Just a pilot." He pushed out into the crowded street, the sounds of the festival washing over him. But the silence of the girl's question followed him louder than the music. Louder than the crowd, louder, even than the ghost of the man whose ring was currently burning a circle into his flesh. "Why do you wear my dad's ring?" Arlen took a sip of his cocoa. It tasted like ash. He needed to get back to his ship. He needed to leave the commercial district. But as he hurried toward the transit lifts, he checked his data pad and saw a notification flashing. A reminder of his next pickup. He wasn't free to leave yet. He was stuck here for another 2 hours. And somewhere behind him, a little wolf girl was finishing her drink, looking at a photo of a dead man and realizing that the pieces of her world didn't quite fit together anymore. Arlen looked up at the artificial moon above the spire. The moon gate pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light like a heartbeat, but to Arlen it looked like a watching eye. "You are supposed to be dead, Rhett," Arlen whispered to the uncaring steel sky. "So why does your daughter have your eyes?" He merged into the crowd, trying to disappear, unaware that he had just lit a beacon that no amount of running could extinguish. The heavy, hydraulic hiss of the cafe door opening cut through the lingering tension like a physical blade. Arlen Shaw was halfway out of his seat, his body angled toward the exit, in a desperate bid for escape, when the figure in the doorway froze him in place. It was not a random patron. It was a force of nature, wrapped in a grease-stained flight suit. Seren looked as though she had just wrestled a starship engine into submission and lost the first 2 rounds. Her heavy boots were scuffed and her dark hair, usually braided tight against her skull in the traditional Lucan warrior fashion, was fraying at the temples. Smears of coolant and hydraulic fluid stained her gray technician's coveralls, but it was the exhaustion etched into her face that hit Arlen the hardest. She scanned the room with eyes the color of molten amber eyes that were currently narrowed in a mix of maternal panic and fury. "Mira," Seren's voice was a low growl vibrating with the unique resonance of her species. "Mira Alara Damar, if you are not visible in 3 seconds, I am going to ground you until the next comet passes." Mira, who had been staring accusingly at Arlen, jumped. Her ears swiveled backward, and her tail tucked itself firmly between her legs. She scrambled off the high stool, looking small and guilty. "Mom," Mira squeaked, "I just wanted cocoa." Seren stormed forward, her heavy boots clanking against the metal floor plates. She ignored the stares of the Nixari patrons and the huffing of the Faliri barista. She reached her daughter in 3 long strides, dropping to one knee to check the girl over her hands, moving with frantic efficiency, checking for injuries, checking temperature, smoothing down ruffled fur. "You went past the perimeter markers," Seren scolded, though her voice had lost its edge, replaced by relief. "The systems are fluctuating, Mira. The magnetic rails are acting up. You cannot just wander off into the commercial sector because you smell sugar." "I am sorry," Mira mumbled, staring at her boots. Then, in a pivot that Arlen had been dreading, she pointed a small, clawed finger directly at him. "But I was okay. Arlen helped me." Seren went still. The name hung in the air, heavy, and charged like the scent of ozone before a lightning strike. Slowly, painfully slowly, Seren turned her head. She looked up from her kneeling position, her amber eyes locking onto Arlen's face. For a moment the bustling cafe, the clinking of ceramic cups, and the distant hum of the ventilation fans ceased to exist. There was only the silent, suffocating weight of 10 years of silence crashing down between them. Arlen felt naked. He felt like he was 20 years old again, standing in a briefing room being dressed down by his commanding officer. Only this was worse. This was Seren. She stood up, unfolding to her full height. She was tall, taller than Arlen by 2 inches, with the broad shoulders of someone who spent her days manipulating gravity wells. "Arlen," she breathed. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. "Hey, Seren," Arlen said. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, forcing a crooked defensive smile onto his face. "Long time. You look well. Aside from the grease. The grease is a good look, though. Very industrial chic." Seren ignored the joke completely. Her gaze was not on his face anymore. It had dropped with terrifying precision to his left hand. Arlen had tried to hide it. He had jammed his hand into his jacket pocket the moment she turned, but he was too slow. Or perhaps she just knew where to look. She knew exactly what should be there. "You," Seren whispered, taking a step closer. The air around her seemed to ripple with heat. "What are you doing here, Arlen, in this sector with my daughter?" "Coincidence," Arlen said, quickly, taking a step back, his back hitting the edge of a table. "Pure, unadulterated bad luck. I was just getting a drink. She was having trouble with the menu. I helped. That is it." "Mama," Mira piped up, her voice innocent, but devastating. "He has Dad's ring. The heavy silver one. With the wolf." The silence that followed was absolute. Seren closed her eyes for a brief second, a spasm of pain crossing her features that was so raw, Arlen felt the urge to look away. When she opened them again, the pain was walled off behind a fortress of cold, hard anger. "Mira," Seren said, her voice steady but tight. "Go wait by the door. Do not step outside. Do not talk to anyone. Just stand there." "But now, Mira!" The girl scrambled away, clutching her half-finished cocoa, casting one last confused look at the two adults. Once she was out of earshot, Seren stepped into Arlen's personal space. She smelled of ozone old engine oil and the faint wood smoke scent that was naturally Lucan. It was a smell that triggered a cascade of memories in Arlen's brain briefings, in cramped cockpits, shared rations on long-haul flights, and Rhett's laughter booming in a mess hall. "Why are you wearing it?" Seren hissed. She did not yell. She did not need to. Her whisper was lethal. "Rhett has been gone for 6 years, Arlen. 6 years. And I know you. You ran. You signed the divorce papers, you left the Star Warden Corps, and you vanished into the drift. You did not want the life. You did not want the connection." She poked him in the chest with a hard, calloused finger. "So why do you walk around with his anchor ring on your finger, like some sort of grieving widow? You lost the right to grieve him like that when you left him." The words struck center mass. Arlen felt his breath hitch. She was right. In every way that mattered on paper, she was right. He had been the one to leave. He had been the one to say that the pressure of the Star Warden life, the triad dynamic of their team, was too much. He had filed the papers. Rhett had begged him to stay, and Arlen had walked away to fly cargo because he was a coward who could not handle being loved by a hero. But she was also wrong. She did not know about the nights Rhett had spent talking to Arlen on secure channels, even after the divorce. She did not know that the ring was not just jewelry, that it was a live circuit, a piece of the Moongate's safety protocol that Rhett had entrusted to him. "I cannot take it off Seren," Arlen said, his voice low. "It is complicated." "Complicated," Seren laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "That is your word for everything. You break a heart. It is complicated. You abandon your post, complicated. You show up in front of his daughter wearing his clan signet, complicated." "I did not know she was his daughter," Arlen protested, desperation creeping into his tone. "I did not know, Seren, I swear. If I had known—" "If you had known, you would have run faster," Seren cut him off. Her eyes were shimmering, unshed tears battling with rage. "That is what you do, Arlen. You run. Rhett stayed. Rhett died staying." "I know," Arlen whispered. The guilt was a physical weight in his stomach, heavy as lead. "I know he did." Seren looked at him, searching his face for something, maybe the arrogant young pilot she used to know, maybe the friend she had lost. She seemed to deflate slightly, the anger giving way to a bone-deep weariness. "You look terrible, Arlen," she said softly. "You look old." "Mileage," Arlen quipped weakly. "It is not the years, it is the parsecs." Seren opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to ask him why he was really there. But the station had other plans. The floor jumped. This time it was not a subtle vibration. It was a violent lurch, as if a giant hand had slapped the side of the Lumenspire. Crockery smashed to the floor. The lights in the cafe died completely, plunging them into darkness for 2 heartbeats before the red emergency strobes kicked in, bathing the room in a bloody pulsing glow. Arlen felt the ring on his finger flare with heat again, white-hot and urgent. He clenched his fist, hiding the glow inside his pocket, biting his tongue to keep from crying out. "Report!" Seren tapped the comms unit on her wrist instantly, her demeanor shifting from angry ex-teammate to chief engineer in a nanosecond. "This is Damar. What was that spike?" A frantic voice crackled over her speaker, loud enough for Arlen to hear. "Seren! The Flux stabilizers on Sector 4 just desynchronized. We are reading a 7% variance in the Moongate's output. It is the lunar bloom. The energy levels are too high. We need manual override on the gravity wells." "I am on my way," Seren barked. "Lock down the transit tubes. Do not let anyone near the core." She cut the connection and looked at Arlen. The personal drama was shoved aside, buried under the immediate crisis. "I have to go," she said. She looked toward the door, where Mira was huddled against the frame, looking terrified in the flashing red light. "The transit lines will be down. I cannot send her home alone on the maintenance lifts. It is too dangerous." Seren looked back at Arlen. It was a look of pure calculation. She hated asking him. He could see it in the set of her jaw. She hated that he was her best option. "Arlen," she said, her voice tight. "Your ship, is it docked at the commercial bays?" "Bay 7, Arlen nodded. "Can you get to the Lucan residential ring from there through the service corridors?" "I can," Arlen said. "I know the routes." "Take her," Seren commanded. It was not a request. "Take Mira to the residential block. Our unit is number 429. My sister is off-world, so the unit is empty, but the biometric lock will open for Mira. Get her inside. Stay with her until I call." "Seren, Do not make me beg Arlen," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "I have to go stop this station from shaking itself apart. I cannot do that if I am worried about my child being trampled in a panic. You owe me. You owe Rhett." That shut him up. "Okay," Arlen said. "I will take her, I promise." Seren nodded, once sharp and efficient. She turned to leave, but stopped. She looked back at him, and for a second the mask slipped. "We are not done talking, Arlen," she warned. "Do not think you can drop her off and disappear into the dark again. I will find you." "I am not running this time," Arlen said. He hoped it was true. Seren sprinted out of the cafe, disappearing into the chaotic crowd of the promenade. Arlen took a deep breath, ignored the burning sensation on his finger, and walked over to Mira. The girl was shaking. Her large ears were pressed flat against her head. "Hey," Arlen said gently, kneeling down again. "Your mom has to go fix the wobbly bits of the station. She asked me to walk you home. Is that okay?" Mira looked at him with huge, watery eyes. "Are we going to fall?" "Fall?" Arlen smiled, projecting a confidence he did not feel. "We are in space, kid. There is no down to fall to. Besides, I am a pilot. Falling is just flying with style, and I have zero style. Come on." He held out his hand, his right hand, the one without the ring. Mira hesitated for a second, then reached out and took it. Her hand was small and warm, her palm slightly rough like her mother's. "Okay," she whispered. The journey to the Lucan residential ring was not short. With the main transit tubes locked down due to the emergency, Arlen had to navigate the service corridors, the veins and arteries of Lumenspire that lay behind the glossy skin of the commercial decks. These tunnels were narrower, smelling of recycled air and ozone. Pipes hissed overhead, and the gravity plating was a little uneven, making their steps feel occasionally lighter or heavier than normal. Mira held his hand tight, but as the minutes passed and the station stopped shaking, her curiosity began to override her fear. "Did you really know him?" she asked suddenly. Her voice echoed slightly in the metal corridor. Arlen did not have to ask who him was. "Yeah," Arlen said, keeping his eyes on the path ahead. "I knew him. We worked together. A long time ago." "Mom says he was the best Star Warden," Mira said, a note of pride creeping into her voice. "She says he could feel the Moongate singing." "He could," Arlen agreed. "Your dad, Rhett, had a way with the energy. Most of us, we just check the gauges and hope for the best. Rhett could put his hand on a bulkhead and tell you which bolt was loose 3 decks down." "He was a hero," Mira stated firmly. "He saved the station." "He did," Arlen said. The words tasted like ash. Rhett had saved the station, yes. But Rhett had also died because Arlen wasn't there to back him up. That was the part of the story Mira didn't know. "He used to tell me stories," Mira continued her tale, giving a tentative wag. "In the hollows he left for me. He recorded them before the accident." Arlen felt a cold chill. "Stories. Yeah, bedtime stories about his team." Mira looked up at Arlen, her golden eyes bright. "He talked about Mama. He said she was the strongest person he knew, like a mountain made of iron. And he talked about the pilot." Arlen stopped walking. "The pilot. Mira nodded. "He never said the name. He just called him the human pilot. He said the pilot was funny but sad. Like a clown who lost his balloons." Arlen snorted. "That sounds like Rhett." "He said the pilot was the best flyer in the galaxy," Mira said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And he said the pilot wore a ring. A special ring, because they were pack." Arlen looked down at the girl. His heart was breaking slowly and methodically, rib by rib. Rhett had told his unborn daughter about him. Rhett had kept Arlen alive in the mythology of his family, even after Arlen had left him. "Pack," Arlen whispered. "Yeah. We were pack." Mira tilted her head, studying Arlen with a terrifying level of insight. "So," she started, biting her lip. "Were you Dad's boyfriend?" Arlen choked. He actually choked on his own breath, coughing violently. The sound echoed loudly in the service tunnel. "I what?" Arlen wheezed, wiping his eyes. "Mom said Dad loved everyone differently," Mira explained, unperturbed by his near-death experience. "She said love is big, and you have his ring, and you look at his picture like Mom looks at his picture. So were you?" Arlen stared at her. He could lie. He could say they were just friends. It would be easier. It would be safer. But looking at Mira, seeing Rhett's nose and Serene's chin, he found he could not do it. "Kid," Arlen sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "You know how some people like cocoa with just sugar, and some people like cocoa with cinnamon, and some weirdos like it with chili powder." Mira giggled. "Chili powder is gross." "Exactly. But some people like all the flavors," Arlen said, feeling incredibly clumsy. "Your dad, Rhett, he had a very big heart. He loved your mom, more than anything. She was his sun and moon. But before that, yeah, we were a flavor of cocoa he liked for a while." Mira processed this for a moment, her ears twitching. "So you are like my ex-stepdad," she ventured. Arlen groaned. "Please do not call me that. That makes me sound ancient and evil. Just Arlen is fine." "Okay, Arlen," Mira smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. "I think cinnamon is okay. Sometimes." They reached the heavy blast door that marked the entrance to the Lucan sector. Arlen punched in the override code, a sequence he hadn't realized he still remembered, until his fingers typed it automatically. The door hissed open. The Lucan residential ring was different from the rest of the spire. The ceilings were higher, the lights were dimmer and warmer, shifting toward the orange spectrum. The air smelled of wood meat and communal living. It was a place of packs of families, living in interconnected units. It was quiet now. Most of the residents likely hunkered down due to the emergency alert. Arlen guided Mira toward Unit 429. As they turned the corner, he saw a figure crouching by the door panel of a nearby storage unit, swearing profusely in Faliri. It was a Faliri with leopard spots and a tool belt that looked ready to explode. "Jax," Arlen called out. The Faliri jumped, dropping a sonic screwdriver. His tail puffed up to 3 times its normal size. "Arlen," Jax Tailwind hissed, retrieving his tool. "By the 9 moons, do not sneak up on a cat like that. I almost shed my winter coat." Jax straightened up, his whiskers twitching. He looked at Arlen, then down at Mira, then back at Arlen. His slit-pupilled eyes widened. "Okay," Jax said slowly. "I know you said you were lonely, but kidnapping a wolf cub seems like a severe overreaction." "I am not kidnapped," Mira said, indignantly stomping her foot. "He is walking me home." "Jax, this is Mira," Arlen said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Mira, this is Jax. He fixes my ship when I break it, which is often." "He is taking me to my mom's unit," Mira explained. "Because the trains are broken." Jax looked at Arlen, a grin spreading across his face that showed far too many sharp teeth. "Mira Damar, as in Seren Damar, the terrifying chief engineer, who threatened to weld my tail to the bulkhead if I parked in the loading zone again." "That is the one," Arlen sighed. "You," Jax pointed a claw at Arlen, delighted. "You are walking Seren Damar's daughter home. You, the man who breaks out in hives if anyone mentions commitment or feelings. Are you dating the wolf matriarch, Arlen? Is this why you have been acting weird?" "I am not dating anyone," Arlen snapped, though his face felt hot. "It is a favor. A one-time emergency favor. Now move your furry carcass so I can get the kid to her door." Jax stepped aside, bowing dramatically. "After you, oh brave knight. Just watch out. I heard Lucan mothers smell fear. And ex-husbands." Arlen froze. He glared at Jax. "One more word and you are walking home out the airlock." Jax zipped his lips, but his eyes were dancing with amusement. Arlen got Mira to door 429. The biometric lock scanned Mira's retina and beeped a cheerful green. The door slid open, revealing a cozy, somewhat messy living space, filled with soft rugs and piles of mechanical parts, a perfect blend of Seren and a 10-year-old. "Okay," Arlen said, kneeling down one last time. "You are in. Lock the door behind you. Do not open it for anyone unless it is your mom or, well, mostly just your mom." Mira lingered in the doorway. She looked at Arlen, then reached out and touched the gloved hand that hid the ring. "Arlen!" "Yeah, kid. I am glad you are not a clown who lost his balloons," she said seriously. "I think you still have one balloon left." She turned and scampered inside. The door slid shut and locked with a heavy clank. Arlen stood there for a moment in the dim hallway, staring at the metal door. "One balloon," he muttered to himself. "Great." "That was adorable," Jax said from behind him. "Disgusting, but adorable. So are we going to talk about why you look like you just saw a ghost?" "No," Arlen said, turning around and walking briskly past the Faliri. "We are going to find a bar that is still open during a red alert, and I am going to drink until I forget the last hour." "I am buying," Jax said, trotting to keep up. "Because I need to hear the story of how you ended up babysitting the spawn of the Spire's scariest woman." Lumenspire. Moongate Core Control 3. decks down in the beating mechanical heart of the station. Seren was not thinking about romance or history. She was trying to keep the universe from tearing itself open. The central chamber of the Moongate was a cavernous sphere of metal and shielding. In the center hung the gate itself, a massive ring of spinning obsidian and light suspended in a containment field. Usually, the gate hummed with a pleasant rhythmic C major chord. Right now, it was screaming. "Flux variance at 12%, a technician yelled over the roar of the cooling fans. "The dampeners are failing on pylons 3 and 4. Seren stood at the master console, her hands flying across the holographic interface. Sweat dripped from her nose, sizzling on the hot control panel. "Reroute power from life support in the cargo bays," Seren ordered. "Vent the excess heat into the void. Do not let that ring harmonize." She slammed a command into the system, forcing the magnetic clamps to tighten. The screaming metal groaned, protesting the strain. The lights flickered violently. And then Seren heard it. It wasn't a sound that came through her ears. It bypassed the auditory nerves entirely and vibrated directly in the base of her skull. "Hool!" It was a sound of absolute hollow emptiness, a sound of cold hunger. It sounded like 1,000 wolves baying at a moon that had died 1,000,000 years ago. Seren gasped, clutching the console for support. Her vision blurred. For a split second, the readouts on her screen didn't show energy graphs. They showed faces. Twisted, screaming faces of Lucan men and women. And among them, for a fraction of a heartbeat, she saw him. Rhett. He wasn't smiling. His face was contorted in agony, his mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes black pits of despair. "Seren." The voice whispered in her mind, cold as the grave. "Let us in. It is cold. Let us in." "No!" Seren shouted, slamming her fist onto the manual override button. "Get out of my head!" The vision snapped. The room returned. The technicians were staring at her. "Chief," one of them asked, terrified. "Chief Damar." Seren was panting her heart, hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The readings were stabilizing. The flux spike was receding. But the cold feeling in her marrow remained. That was not a malfunction. That was not just energy. She had felt that presence once before. 6 years ago. The day the accident happened. The day Rhett disappeared. Something was inside the gate. Or something was trying to come through. And somehow she knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that it was connected to the man she had just seen in the cafe. The man wearing the anchor ring. The ring was the key. Rhett had told her once in bed, whispering secrets he shouldn't have shared. The anchor rings aren't just jewelry, Seren. They are quantum entangled with the gate's core. If the system fails, the ring holds the pattern. If the thing in the gate was waking up, it was because the ring had returned to the spire. Seren wiped the sweat from her eyes. Her hand was trembling. She needed answers. She needed the truth, not the deflected jokes of a pilot who ran away from his feelings. She pulled out her datapad. Her fingers hovered over Arlen's contact info, a file she hadn't opened in 6 years, but had never deleted. She typed quickly, her movements sharp and angry. To Arlen Shaw, message: "We need to talk. Dinner. Lumenspire, Deck 5. The Italian place. 19:00 hours. Do not be late, and bring the ring." She hit send with a vicious jab. The hollow howl echoed faintly in the back of her mind, a distant threat promising that the worst was yet to come. Seren gritted her teeth. "You want to fight," she whispered to the spinning gate. "I am a mother now. I will tear this universe apart before I let you touch my family." She turned back to her crew. "Get me a diagnostic on the psychic shielding. Now." The game had changed, and Arlen Shaw was no longer just an ex-husband. He was the only weapon she had left. The restaurant on Deck 5, whimsically named the Celestial Palate, was a sensory riot that usually gave Arlen a headache within 5 minutes. Today, however, the headache was entirely self-inflicted, born of anxiety, rather than the ambient noise. The establishment catered to the diverse biology of Lumenspire's population. To Arlen's left, a table of Nixari aristocrats were sipping viscous dark red liquid from crystal flutes, synthetic hemoglobin enriched with lunar isotopes, a vintage that cost more than Arlen's ship. To his right, a family of Draken were happily crunching on what looked like glowing charcoal briquettes, smoke curling lazily from their nostrils as they chatted in deep rumbling tones. Arlen stared down at his own plate, a simple steaming portion of spaghetti with tomato sauce. In this galaxy of exotic metabolisms being a baseline, Human often felt like being the only person at a masquerade ball wearing a beige cardigan. "You know," Jax Tailwind said, using a pair of precision tweezers to pick up a piece of pickled fish from his bowl. "I have seen engines with more culinary imagination than your dinner, Arlen. It is just starch and red slime." "It is comfort food, Jax," Arlen muttered, twirling his fork. "Something you would understand if your species didn't treat eating like a tactical refueling operation." "I treat eating with respect," the Fileri mechanic retorted, his whiskers twitching with amusement. "That is why I ordered the fermented void eel. It fights back a little, adds excitement." Sitting between them, Mira giggled. She had a plate of grilled venison. Lucan dietary requirements were high protein, but she was currently more interested in the small holographic game projector Jax had set up in the center of the table. Tiny ships made of light zipped around the salt shakers. Across from Arlen sat Seren. She had not touched her steak. Her amber eyes were fixed on Arlen, dissecting him with the same precision she used to diagnose a failing gravity drive. "You brought a buffer," Seren said. "It wasn't a question." She nodded slightly toward Jax. "I brought a character witness," Arlen corrected, though his voice lacked conviction. "Jax is here to testify that I am only 90% idiot, not 100%. "I agreed to no such thing," Jax chirped, not looking up from his fish. "I am here for the free food and the inevitable drama. Please proceed with the emotional devastation." "Do not mind me," Seren sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. She reached out and tapped the table, signaling the privacy field generator in the centerpiece. A shimmering bubble of silence enclosed their booth, dampening the roar of the restaurant to a dull hum. "Mira," Seren said softly. The wolf girl looked up, sauce on her cheek. "Yes, Mama." "Play your game with Uncle Jax for a bit. Arlen and I need to talk about boring adult things. Taxes. Engine repair schedules." "Okay," Mira chirped, easily distracted. She turned back to Jax. "I bet I can beat your high score." "Unlikely, small predator," Jax grinned. "I have reflexes honed by catching wrenches dropped by clumsy pilots." As the two of them engaged in a heated battle of holographic starfighters, Seren leaned forward. The air in the privacy bubble felt suddenly thin. "The ring, Arlen," she said. No preamble. "Talk." Arlen set his fork down. He twisted the heavy silver band on his finger, a nervous tick. He hadn't realized he had until today. "I did not keep it because I was pining," Arlen said, his voice low. "Well, not just because of that." "Then why?" Seren pressed. "Rhett's will said the ring was to be returned to you. I was angry when I read that. I thought he was just being sentimental. I thought he wanted you to have a keepsake of the marriage you walked away from." "I walked away because I was drowning, Seren," Arlen said, the admission scraping his throat. But Rhett knew something was wrong with the gate long before the accident. He knew the Star Warden Corps was being disbanded, that the Council was replacing pilots with automation. He didn't trust the new systems. Arlen pulled his hand out of his pocket and placed it on the table. Under the warm lighting of the restaurant, the silver wolf etched into the metal seemed to snarl. "It is not just jewelry, Seren. It is a secondary resonance key. An anchor." Seren's eyes widened. As an engineer, she understood the implication immediately. Impossible. The anchor protocols were wiped 10 years ago. They are biometric. They require a live connection to the core. Rhett modified it, Arlen whispered. The night before the accident, the night he died, he sent me a data packet. I didn't open it until months later. I was too busy being drunk and miserable. But when I did, it was a schematic. He had quantum entangled this ring with his own biological signature and the gate's core frequency. Seren's face paled. He made a backup, a manual override. He knew he might not make it back out, Arlen said, his eyes burning. He knew that if the flux surged, the automated systems would fail. He needed a human or Lucan element to ground the charge. He turned this ring into a portable lightning rod. So when you wear it, Seren trailed off, horror dawning on her. I feel the gate, Arlen admitted. For 6 years, Seren, every spike, every tremor, every time the station shakes, I feel it in my bones. It is like carrying a piece of a sun in my pocket. I cannot take it off. If I do, the connection severs and the backup safety protocol dies with it. Seren sat back stunned. She looked at the ring with new eyes, not as a symbol of a failed marriage, but as a burden, a shackle. He never told me, she whispered. He went into that chamber knowing he was going to become pure energy to stabilize the core, and he left you holding the leash. He trusted you to keep the station running, Arlen said gently. He trusted me to be the failsafe, even though I didn't deserve it. He didn't die, Seren said suddenly. Arlen froze. What? His body, Seren said, her voice trembling. We never found it. The official report said he was vaporized by the flux. But Arlen, I was there. I was monitoring the sensors. There was no thermal spike consistent with organic vaporization. He just displaced. He stepped into the stream, and he was gone. The only thing that came back out was the ring, floating on a wave of magnetic pressure. A heavy silence settled between them. The idea was terrifying. If he hadn't died, then where was he? I think Arlen started, but he was cut off. The table shook. It wasn't a bump, it was a heave. The pasta sauce in Arlen's bowl rippled, forming concentric rings. The holographic ships on the table flickered and vanished. Outside the window, the beautiful pulsating light of the moongate suddenly turned a sickly, violent violet. The privacy bubble shattered with a digital screech. The restaurant erupted into chaos. At the table next to them, a Nexari noble stood up, his eyes rolling back in his head, his fangs extending fully. He swept the crystal glasses off his table with a snarl that sounded nothing like a civilized being. Blood! The vampire hissed, lunging at a passing waiter. Thirsty, at the Draken table, the father of the family roared, smoke billowing from his mouth in a thick, choking cloud. He slammed his claws into the table, splintering the synthetic wood. Arlen, Jax, said, his voice devoid of all humor. His ears were pressed flat against his skull, and his fur was standing on end. I feel angry. I really want to scratch something. Violently, Arlen grabbed his left hand. The ring was searing hot. It wasn't just warm now. It felt like he had stuck his finger into a plasma torch. The howl, Arlen gasped, gritting his teeth against the pain. It is hitting the station. What? Seren was on her feet, instantly pulling Mira behind her. The hollow howl, Arlen yelled over the rising panic of the restaurant. The psychic backlash. It is amplifying instincts, hunger, rage, fear. It is turning everyone into their base selves, Mira screamed. It was a high, piercing sound. She clapped her hands over her ears, curling into a ball on the booth seat. Dad! Mira cried out, tears streaming down her furred cheeks. Make it stop, Dad! You are hurting me! Stop screaming! Seren grabbed her daughter by the shoulders. Mira! Look at me, who is screaming! Dad! Mira sobbed. He is lost! He is cold! He wants to come in! The lights in the restaurant exploded. not flickered, exploded. Showers of sparks rained down on the patrons. The emergency red lighting kicked in, bathing the scene in a hellish glow. Seren's wrist comms screeched a Priority 1 alert. All engineering personnel. Code Black, lunar flux breach in progress. Gravity stabilizers failing. Evacuate decks 4 through 8. Evacuate, Jax shouted, grabbing his toolkit. If the stabilizers fail, there is nowhere to evacuate to the station will spin apart. Seren looked at Arlen. The time for secrets was over. The time for awkward dinners was dead. Can you stop it? She demanded, grabbing the lapels of his jacket. Arlen looked at his hand. The ring was glowing with a visible white light now pulsing in time with the violent, violet flashing of the moongate outside. I can't stop it from here, Arlen said. He looked at Seren and, for the first time in 6 years, the mask of the careless pilot dropped completely. The man standing there was a Star Warden. I need to get to the core. I need to touch the gate. You are a pilot, Seren said, testing him. You fly cargo. I am a Star Warden, Arlen corrected, his voice hard as steel. And I am the anchor. If Rhett is in there, if that is his voice, Mira is hearing then. I am the only one who can talk him down. Or he will kill you, Seren said. Then I guess I will finally pay my tab. Arlen managed a grim smile. Let's move, Seren shouted, hoisting Mira into her arms. Jax, get to the maintenance shafts. I need you to manually override the coolant valves on Deck 12. If we don't cool that ring down, we are going to melt. I hate pipes, Jax complained, but he was already running. I hate confined spaces. I am a cat. I value my freedom. Go. Seren, Arlen, and Mira sprinted out of the restaurant, diving into the chaotic corridor. The scene outside was a nightmare. The civilized veneer of Lumenspire had cracked. People were fighting. A Draken was breathing fire at a security drone. 2 Lucans were tearing a vending machine apart with their bare hands. Don't look. Baby, don't look, Seren whispered to Mira, pressing the girl's face into her shoulder as she shoved her way through the mob, using her Lucan strength to clear a path. To the tram, Arlen shouted, pointing to the maglev line. It is offline, but we can run the track. They scrambled over the turnstiles. The tunnel was dark, lit only by the sparking rails. It is 3 kilometers to the core, Seren yelled as they ran, her boots pounding on the metal. We don't have time, Arlen panted. The pain in his hand was becoming blinding. It was traveling up his arm, settling in his chest. Seren, if I pass out, drag me. Suddenly, a massive shadow blocked their path. It was a Draken, not a civilian. This was a security officer, scaled in dark green armor, but his eyes were glowing with a mindless, feral red light. The howl had taken him. He roared a sound that shook dust from the ceiling and blocked the tunnel smoke curling from his maw. He thinks we are intruders, Seren hissed, setting Mira down. Mira, stay behind me. I will handle him, Arlen said, stepping forward. He will snap you in half, human, Seren warned. I don't need to fight him, Arlen said. He raised his left hand. I just need to wake him up. He thrust the glowing anchor ring toward the Draken. Sereth sent me, he shouted, invoking the name of the bartender. He knew a name that carried weight in the Draken community. But it wasn't the name that worked. It was the energy, Arlen focused. He channeled the chaotic noise, screaming in his head the howl, and pushed a pulse of order through the ring. It was a Star Warden technique, resonance dampening. A shockwave of silver light blasted from the ring, hitting the Draken in the chest. The massive lizard stumbled back. The red light in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by confusion. He shook his head, looking at his claws. Pilot, the Draken grunted, his voice thick. Why am I angry? Flux sickness, Arlen said, gasping for breath. That move had cost him. Get to the upper decks. Tell everyone to lock their doors. The Draken nodded dumbly and lumbered away. You really are a Star Warden, Seren whispered, staring at him. We can discuss my resume later, Arlen groaned. Run! Lumenspire, the core chamber. The doors to the core blast chamber hissed open, and the heat hit them like a physical wall. It was an inferno of noise. The moon gate, usually a majestic ring of light, was now a jagged tear in reality. Arcs of purple lightning whipped around the chamber, striking the containment pylons. Seraith! Arlen yelled. The Draken bartender was already there. She had shed her apron and was in her full, scaled glory, standing on a catwalk above the gate. She was breathing fire not to burn but to consume. She was inhaling the excess plasma venting from the gate, using her Draken biology to act as a living heat sink. I cannot hold it! Seraith roared, her voice booming. The pressure is too high. The Flux is trying to rewrite the laws of physics in here. Jax is on the valves, Seren shouted, running to the main console. She typed furiously. I am locking the magnetic fields, Arlen. The interface is on the central platform. Arlen looked at the platform. It was a narrow bridge extending right to the edge of the gate. The energy there was dense enough to crush a man. Go! Seren yelled. I will keep the walkway stable. Arlen ran. Every step was a fight against the magnetic wind pushing him back. His flight jacket flapped violently. His hair whipped around his face. He reached the end of the platform. The gate towered over him, a swirling vortex of violet clouds and screaming darkness. The howl was deafening here. It wasn't just noise anymore, it was words. Abandoned, betrayed, cold, so cold. Arlen looked at his hand. The ring was vibrating so fast it was a blur. Okay, Rhett, Arlen screamed into the storm. You wanted a partner, you got one. He slammed his hand palm open onto the interface panel. Contact. The world vanished. Lumenspire was gone. Seren was gone. The heat was gone. Arlen was floating in a void of gray mist and silver geometric lines. This was the construct, the mental interface of the moon gate. But it was corrupted. Black, oily smoke coiled around the silver lines. The smoke formed shapes, snarling wolves, weeping faces, broken ships. And in the center of it, all stood a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with messy dark hair and a grin that could light up a star system. Rhett. He looked exactly as Arlen remembered him from the day of the accident. He was wearing his flight suit unzipped halfway, to reveal a chest that Arlen had rested his head on 1,000 times. Arlen, the figure said. His voice was warm. It sounded like home. You came back. Arlen's heart seized. He took a step forward in the void. Rhett, is that you? I have been waiting. Rhett smiled, extending a hand. It is so lonely in here, Arlen. The current, it pulls at you. It tries to wash you away. But I held on. I held on for you. For Seren. For our girl. Tears welled in Arlen's eyes. I am sorry. I am so sorry I left. It is okay, Rhett said soothingly. You can make it right. You just have to let me out. Let us all out. Arlen paused. All the others. Rhett gestured behind him. The black smoke coalesced into hundreds of shadowy figures, Lucan silhouettes. The ones who died in the accident. We are all trapped here, Arlen. The gate caught us. We are stuck in the buffer. We are cold. We want to go home. Open the gate! Arlen! Rhett urged, his face twisting slightly into a look of desperate hunger. Override the safety. Break the seal. Let us come back to the spire. Arlen reached out. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. To bring Rhett back, to fix the mistake that had ruined 3 lives. It was everything he had ever wanted. But then the ring on his finger. His spiritual avatar's finger burned. It wasn't a burn of pain this time. It was a burn of warning. Arlen looked at the ring. The wolf etching was snarling. He looked back at Rhett. Rhett, Arlen said slowly. What was the last thing you said to me before I signed the divorce papers? The figure blinked. I said I loved you, Arlen. I said come back. Arlen stepped back. The tears in his eyes dried, instantly replaced by cold, hard realization. No, Arlen whispered. You didn't. Arlen, don't be difficult. The figure's voice deepened. It began to sound like many voices layered together. Open the door. Rhett said, fly safe, you stubborn idiot. Arlen said, his voice rising. He never begged. He never asked me to compromise the safety of the station. And he certainly wouldn't risk Seren and Mira just to save himself. The figure of Rhett flickered. The warm skin turned gray. The eyes turned into black pits. You are not Rhett, Arlen shouted. You are the howl. You are the leftover garbage. You are the fear he shed before he died. Open the door, the entity screamed. It wasn't Rhett anymore. It was a monster of smoke and shadow towering over Arlen. We are hungry. No. Arlen slammed his will against the interface. Lockdown sealed the breach. Then we will take what is ours. The entity lunged past Arlen. It didn't attack him. It followed the connection. It followed the ring, and the ring was connected to the bloodline. Lumenspire, the core chamber. Arlen, Seren screamed. Arlen's body, standing rigid at the console, arched back as if he had been electrocuted. But it wasn't Arlen who was in danger. 10 meters away, where Seren had hidden Mira behind a heavy generator unit, the girl suddenly levitated. Mom! Mira shrieked. A tendril of violet energy had shot out of the moon gate. It wrapped around Mira's waist like a tentacle of solid light. No! Seren launched herself from the console. She tackled Mira, wrapping her arms around her daughter's legs. The pull was immense. Seren dug her boots into the metal, grating sparks flying, but she was being dragged across the floor toward the swirling vortex. It has her, Seren yelled, her voice breaking with terror. Arlen, help us! Arlen snapped out of his trance. He gasped, falling to his knees, blood trickling from his nose. He saw Seren and Mira sliding toward the event horizon of the gate. The hollow howl was bypassing the manual locks. It was using Mira, using her biological connection to Rhett as a physical key to pull itself out. Let her go, Arlen roared. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted toward them. He grabbed Seren's belt just as they reached the edge of the platform. Now, they were a chain. Mira being pulled by the gate, Seren holding Mira, Arlen holding Seren, and Arlen anchored to the floor by nothing but friction and stubbornness. It is too strong, Seren cried, her muscles straining. I can't hold her. Mira was crying, her eyes rolling back. Daddy says, come to him. That is not your dad, Mira, Arlen shouted. Listen to me, that is not him. Arlen looked at the ring. It was blindingly bright. He realized what he had to do. The entity was using the ring's frequency to pull Mira. He had to disrupt the signal. But he couldn't take the ring off. It was fused to the circuit now. He had to complete the circuit. He had to bring a third variable into the equation. Mira! Arlen yelled. Grab the ring! What? Seren screamed. Are you crazy? Grab my hand, Arlen shouted, reaching past Seren, extending his left hand toward the girl. Mira, take my hand, trust me. Mira, suspended in the air by the energy field, looked down. She saw Arlen. She saw the fear in his eyes, but also the fierce, desperate protectiveness. She reached out. Her small, Lucian fingers wrapped around Arlen's hand, covering the burning silver ring. Snap, the connection formed. Arlen, Seren, Mira, the ring, the gate. They were no longer three people struggling on a platform. They were a single circuit of energy. And in that moment, the world dissolved into white. The sensation of the lunar flux was not like drowning. Drowning was physical. It involved lungs and water and the desperate thrashing of limbs. This was different. This was a dissolution of the self. Arlen Shaw no longer felt his body. He did not feel the cold metal of the core platform beneath his knees, nor the heat of the burning ring on his finger. He did not even feel the small, desperate hand of the wolf girl gripping his own. He was floating in a soup of liquid gray static. It was the color of a dead television channel, the color of rain on a funeral day. Time had no meaning here. He might have been floating for 5 seconds, or 5 centuries. The construct, the mental interface of the Moongate, was fractured, bleeding memories, like a severed artery. Arlen, the voice, came from everywhere and nowhere. It rippled through the gray mist, carrying the weight of 1,000 disappointments. Arlen turned, or thought he turned, in the void. The mist coalesced. It formed shapes that Arlen recognized with a sickening lurch of his consciousness. He saw the signing of the divorce papers, the pen shaking in his hand. He saw the back of Rhett's head as he walked out of their shared quarters for the last time, a duffel bag slung over one broad shoulder. He saw the moment he resigned from the Star Warden Corps, handing his badge to a faceless officer. "You always run," the voice whispered. It was Rhett's voice, but stripped of all its warmth. It was cold, metallic, and cruel. "It is your superpower, Arlen. You run." From the shadows, a figure emerged. It looked like Rhett DeMar. It wore the flight suit Rhett had died in. It had Rhett's face, his jawline, his heavy brow. But the eyes were wrong. They were not the warm amber of the Lucan bloodline. They were voids of absolute blackness, leaking oily smoke. This was the avatar of the Hollow Howl. "I didn't want to run," Arlen whispered. In this space, thoughts were spoken words. "I was scared." "I wasn't strong enough." "Precisely," the Shadow Rhett sneered. Behind him, a pack of spectral wolves materialized, the distorted echoes of the other Lucan engineers who had perished in the accident. They circled Arlen, their teeth bared, dripping with liquid darkness. "You left me to hold the sky up alone, Arlen. You knew the gate was unstable. You knew the Council had cut corners. But you wanted your freedom. You wanted to fly cargo and pretend the universe wasn't falling apart." "I thought you would be safe," Arlen pleaded, the guilt tearing at his mind like physical claws. "I thought if I left you would focus on the job. I was a distraction." "You were a coward," the Shadow Rhett snarled, stepping closer. The figure loomed over Arlen, growing larger, more monstrous. "And because of you, I burned. Do you know what it feels like to be unmade, Arlen? To have your atoms stripped away one by one, while you scream for help that never comes." Arlen curled into a ball in the void. He wanted to die. He wanted to let the Flux take him, to erase the guilt that had been his constant companion for 6 years. "Give up," the Shadow Rhett commanded. "Open the gate. Let us out. We are hungry. We want to consume the light. We want to make them all feel the cold." Arlen's resolve crumbled. The accusation was too accurate. It was exactly what he whispered to himself in the dark after 3 whiskeys. He reached out with his mind ready to surrender the command codes, ready to tear the blast doors open and let the nightmare spill into Lumenspire. But then, a sound cut through the gray static. It wasn't a howl. It wasn't a scream. It was a hum. A clumsy, off-key humming of a lullaby. And a voice, not in his head, but coming from a great distance, anchored in the physical world. "Arlen Shaw, if you die on me right now, I will resurrect you just to kill you myself." It was Seren. The sound of her voice, furious, terrified and fiercely alive, sent a shockwave through the mist. The gray static flickered. "You owe me dinner," Seren's voice cracked, sounding like she was weeping while she shouted. "You owe me 6 years of child support payments for a kid you didn't know you had. Do not you dare let go. You are not a coward. You are just an idiot." "There is a difference." Arlen blinked. The Shadow Rhett recoiled slightly, as if struck by a stone. "Ignore her," the Shadow Rhett hissed. "She moved on. She forgot us." "No," Arlen whispered. "She never forgot." Then another sensation hit him. A warmth. It started at his left hand, the hand wearing the anchor ring. It wasn't the searing heat of the flux. It was a gentle, golden warmth. It felt like sunlight hitting fur. It felt like a small hand gripping his. Daddy. The thought wasn't his. It was small, scared, but incredibly bright. Daddy, are you in there? Mira. Arlen gasped. The gray mist around him began to boil away. Shafts of golden light pierced the darkness. The spectral wolves yelped and scattered, burning away like fog under a morning sun. The shadow ret snarled, shielding his black eyes. No, keep her out, the bloodline is too bright. She is here, Arlen realized, standing up in the void. He looked at his hand. The ring was glowing with a brilliance that blinded him. She is the bridge. Lumenspire, the core chamber, physical reality. The scene on the platform was a tableau of desperate resistance. The gravity generators were screaming, the sound reaching a pitch that shattered the glass covers of the instrument panels. Violet lightning arced wildly from the moon gate, striking the walls, the floor, and the shielding. Seren Damar was lying flat on the metal, grating her boots hooked around a heavy stanchion. Her arms were locked around Mira's waist. Mira was floating horizontally, her body stiff, her eyes glowing with pure white energy. Her hair stood on end, floating in the anti-gravity field generated by the flux. Her left hand was clamped onto Arlen's hand, and Arlen was the anchor. He was on his knees, his head thrown back, eyes rolled up into his skull. Blood streamed from his nose and ears, dripping onto his flight jacket. The energy pouring through him was immense enough to power a destroyer-class starship. "Hold it!" Seren screamed, her muscles burning with lactic acid. "Do not let go, baby. Hold on to him." "I have got the coolant flush at 80%. Jax's voice came over the comms, breathless and panicked. "But the pipes are rattling like a bag of bolts. If the pressure doesn't drop in 30 seconds, the main seals are going to blow." "Zeraith!" Seren yelled. "We need more heat venting." On the catwalk above the Draken bartender roared. She was fully transformed, now her scales glowing cherry red. She opened her maw and inhaled a massive gout of violet fire that erupted from a rupture in the gate's casing. It was an impossible feat of biology, absorbing energy that would melt steel. "I am full!" Zeraith bellowed, her voice booming like thunder. "I cannot eat any more fire. Seren, fix it." Seren looked at the trio on the platform. Arlen, Mira, and the gate. They were locked in a circuit. "Come on, Arlen." Seren whispered, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "You promised. You said you weren't running this time. Fight him. Fight the ghosts." The construct. The shared mindscape. The gray void had changed. The golden light radiating from Mira's presence had pushed back the shadows, creating a sphere of clarity in the center of the storm. And the scenery had shifted. It was no longer a shapeless void. It had resolved into a memory, a place that Arlen knew better than his own cockpit. It was the old apartment, the one he and Rhett had shared on Deck 9 before the divorce. There was the scuffed metal table where they ate takeout noodles. There was the view screen that was always stuck on the sports channel. There was the pile of engine parts Rhett insisted on cleaning in the living room. Arlen stood in the center of the room. Beside him, holding his hand, stood Mira. But in this mental space, Mira wasn't a child. Or rather, she was a child made of light. She looked around the apartment with wide, curious eyes. "Is this where you lived?" Mira asked. Her voice was clear here, unhindered by fear. "Yes," Arlen said, his voice choking up. "This was home." "It is messy," Mira observed. "Your dad was messy," Arlen said, a tear tracking down his face. "Get out." The shadow ret smashed through the wall of the apartment. The memory room shuddered. The shadow was huge now, a towering monstrosity of black smoke and teeth filling the hallway. "This is my memory. You abandoned it. You cannot come back." The shadow raised a massive claw to strike them. Arlen stepped in front of Mira, raising his arms to shield her. He had no weapons here, only his guilt. But the blow, never landed. A hand caught the shadow's wrist. It was a normal hand. A Lucan hand, calloused and stained with grease. "That is enough," a voice said. Calm, warm, solid. Arlen's heart stopped. Stepping out from the kitchen area of the memory apartment was a man. He wasn't made of smoke. He wasn't made of light. He looked real. He was wearing a faded t-shirt that said "Engineering, we fix what pilots break." He had a smudge of sauce on his chin. He looked tired, but his amber eyes were bright and clear. "Rhett," Arlen whispered. The real Rhett DeMar smiled. It was the smile that Arlen had fallen in love with 15 years ago. A smile that said everything was going to be okay even if the engine was on fire. "Hey, flyboy," Rhett said softly. "You kept the ring. I knew you would." The shadow Rhett shrieked a sound of pure dissonance. I am the truth, I am the anger." "You are the sludge," the real Rhett said, looking at the monster with pity. "You are the fear I felt when the radiation hit. You are the anger I felt at the unfairness of dying. You are the garbage I left behind so I could keep the important parts safe." Rhett shoved the shadow back with surprising strength. The monster stumbled crashing into the holographic television. Rhett turned to Mira. He knelt down, ignoring Arlen for a moment. He looked at the girl of light. "Hello, little star," Rhett whispered. "You got so big." Mira stared at him. "Daddy!" "Yeah." Rhett said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is me. I am sorry I missed the bedtime stories." Mira threw herself at him. In the physical world this would be impossible, but here mind met mind. Rhett caught her burying his face in her hair. Arlen stood there watching them, feeling like an intruder in his own salvation. He waited for Rhett to look at him with accusation. He waited for the anger. Rhett stood up, keeping one hand on Mira's shoulder, and looked at Arlen. "You look terrible," Rhett said, grinning. "Gray hair, really. I have been gone 6 years, not 60. "Stress," Arlen managed to croak. "My ex-husband was a dramatic hero who haunted a space station. It takes a toll." Rhett laughed. It was a beautiful sound. "Arlen, listen to me. We do not have much time. The howl, that thing, it is getting stronger. It is feeding on the panic in the station." "It says I killed you," Arlen said. "It says I ran away." "You did run," Rhett said, his face becoming serious. "And it broke my heart. I am not going to lie and say it didn't. But Arlen, the accident, that wasn't you. That was the Flux. That was bad engineering and bad luck." Rhett stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I went into the chamber that day because I knew the codes," Rhett said intensely. "And I knew that if I died, you would live. I made a choice, Arlen. It was my choice, not your failure." "But you are trapped," Arlen said. "You are stuck in this hell." "It is not hell." Rhett looked around the apartment. "It is a waiting room. I held on to the core consciousness. I kept the other engineers from dissolving completely into the howl. I wrapped us in these memories. But I can't hold it anymore. The howl wants to break out. If it does, if it opens the gate." "It destroys Lumenspire," Arlen finished. "It destroys everything," Rhett corrected. "It will act like a psychic virus. It will turn every living being on the station into a feral monster. You saw what happened in the cafe. That was just a whisper. Imagine the scream." "So, what do we do?" Mira asked, looking up at her father. "Do we fight the monster?" "We can't kill it." Rhett shook his head. "It is energy. It has to go somewhere." The shadow Rhett was recovering, pulling itself up from the wreckage of the living room. It roared, and the walls of the apartment began to crack, revealing the violet storm outside. "Open the door!" the shadow screamed. "We have 3 options," Rhett said quickly. "Option 1. We do nothing. The containment fails. The station explodes. Everyone dies. Bad option." "Agreed," Arlen said. "Option 2. You open the gate fully," Rhett said. The energy releases. The howl escapes. It saves the station from exploding, but the psychic wave wipes the mind of everyone on board. Also a bad option. Option 3, Arlen asked. Rhett looked at Arlen's hand, at the anchor ring. Filtration, Rhett said. We use the ring as a sieve. We channel the entire energy of the gate through the connection. We separate the howl, the negative entropy, and we vent it into deep space harmlessly. And we keep the pure energy, the memories, the consciousness here. Safe. That sounds doable, Arlen said. What is the catch? Rhett looked at him with profound sadness. The ring is the filter, Arlen, but you are the conductor. The energy has to pass through you. All of it. The pain, the fear, the death. Arlen understood immediately. It will burn me out. It will burn the Starwarden part of you out, Rhett said softly. Your ability to feel the flux, it will be gone, scoured clean. You will never feel the stars singing again. You will just be a pilot. Arlen looked down at his hands. Being a Starwarden was what made him special. It was why he was arrogant. It was why he was valuable. Without it, he was just a middle-aged man who flew cargo. But then, he looked at Mira. She was glowing. She was alive. He looked at Rhett. And what happens to you? Arlen asked. If we purge the howl, Rhett said, the anomaly stabilizes. My consciousness and the others will fade. We won't be ghosts anymore. We will just be memories. Resting, finally. So I lose you, Arlen whispered. For real this time. You lost me 6 years ago, Arlen, Rhett said gently. You have just been haunting yourself. It is time to let me go. The walls of the apartment shattered completely. The shadow howl lunged a tidal wave of darkness. Arlen, Rhett shouted. Decide. Arlen didn't hesitate. He looked at the shadow. He looked at the monster born of his own guilt and Rhett's pain. I am a pilot, Arlen said, grinning his crooked grin, and I fly the heavy loads. He grabbed Rhett's hand with his left. He grabbed Mira's hand with his right. Do it, Arlen screamed. Lumenspire, the core chamber, physical reality. Arlen, Seren shrieked. On the platform, Arlen's body arched so violently that bones cracked audible over the roar of the storm. The anchor ring on his finger didn't just glow, it ignited. A beam of pure blinding white light shot from his hand straight into the heart of the violet vortex. The sound that followed was not a howl. It was the sound of a universe snapping back into place. Crack. The violet clouds in the gate swirled and screamed. The black, oily smoke that had been leaking out was suddenly sucked into the beam of white light. It channeled through Arlen. Arlen screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of agony. Every nerve ending in his body was being dipped in acid. He felt the hatred of the howl passing through his veins. He felt the cold of deep space. He felt the terror of dying. Dad! Mira cried out, her own body glowing, as she funneled her Lucan vitality into him to keep his heart beating. I have got you, Seren yelled, burying her face in Arlen's back, anchoring him with every ounce of her strength. I have got you, Arlen breathed. On the monitors, the energy readings went off the scale. He is venting it, Jax shouted from the maintenance tunnel. Look at the external sensors. A massive pulse of negative energy just shot out of the spire's north pole. It is dispersing into the void. In the chamber, the violet light began to fade. The black smoke was gone, purged from the system. Replacing it was a soft golden luminescence. The shaking stopped. The gravity stabilized. The lightning died. Arlen collapsed forward, but Seren caught him. The connection was still open, but only for a second more. In the fading light of the gate, a hologram appeared. It wasn't projected by a machine. It was projected by the fading flux. It was Rhett, giant, translucent, and peaceful. He looked down at the platform. He saw Seren holding his exhausted body. He saw Mira clinging to Arlen's arm. He saw Arlen broken and bleeding but alive. The giant figure of Rhett smiled. He raised a hand in a salute. "Tell Seren," the voice whispered through the room, not from the speakers, but from the air itself. "And our girl that I am proud of both of you." He looked at Arlen one last time. "Fly safe, pilot." And then he dissolved. The golden light scattered into motes of dust that drifted down like snow. The moongate returned to its dormant state, a ring of quiet obsidian stone. Silence fell over the core chamber. Absolute ringing silence. The only sound was Arlen's ragged, wheezing breath. "Arlen," Seren whispered, turning him over. Arlen's face was pale gray as ash. Blood was crusted under his nose. His eyes were closed. The anchor ring on his finger was dark. The silver wolf was no longer glowing. It looked dull, lifeless. Just a piece of old metal. "Arlen," Seren shook him. Do not you dare die on me after that speech." Mira crawled over, sobbing quietly. She put her hand on Arlen's chest. "His heart is beating, Mama," she whispered. "But it is slow." Arlen's eyelids fluttered. He groaned a sound of pure misery. "Seren," he rasped. His voice sounded like he had swallowed gravel. "I am here," Seren said, choking back a sob. "I am here, you idiot. You magnificent idiot." Arlen tried to focus his eyes. He looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at his hand. He stared at the dull ring for a long moment. "I can't hear it," Arlen whispered. "Hear what?" Seren asked, wiping blood from his forehead. "The stars," Arlen said, a single tear slipping from his eye. "The flux, the gate, it is all quiet. It is just silence." He had paid the price. The Star Warden was gone. "Is that okay?" Mira asked, clutching his hand. Arlen looked at the girl. He looked at Seren. He felt the solid warmth of their bodies against his. He felt the metal grating of the floor. He felt the pain in his knees. It was ordinary. It was mundane. It was quiet. "Yeah," Arlen breathed, closing his eyes again, letting exhaustion pull him under. "Yeah, silence is good." He passed out, his head resting in Seren's lap, his hand still firmly gripped in Mira's. Above them, the cooling fans spun down, and for the first time in 6 years, the air in the core felt clean. The silence was the loudest thing Arlen Shaw had ever heard. For 6 years, his mind had been a cacophony of white noise, the hum of the ether, the singing of the stars, and the deep, resonant thrum of the lunar flux vibrating through the anchor ring. It had been a background static that he had learned to ignore like the drone of a ship's engine while sleeping in the bunk. But now, as he drifted up from the depths of unconsciousness, there was nothing. No hum, no vibration. Just the absolute terrifying quiet of his own mind. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was white, a stark, clinical white that smelled of antiseptic and synthesized lilies. He blinked his eyelids, feeling like they were weighted with lead. He tried to move his hand, but his body felt heavy, as if gravity had decided to dial itself up by 20%, just to spite him. "Do not try to get up," a voice said from his right. "Dr. Cove said your neural pathways need at least 48 hours to re-insulate. Apparently channeling the entire psychic output of a moon-sized gate strips the insulation right off your nerves." Arlen turned his head. The movement made the room spin lazily, but he managed to focus. Seren Damar was sitting in a plastic chair next to his biobed. She looked terrible. Beautiful, but terrible. There were dark bruises of exhaustion under her amber eyes, and her hair, usually braided tight, was loose and messy around her shoulders. She was still wearing her grease-stained flight suit, though someone had draped a clean blanket over her legs. "Hey," Arlen croaked. His voice sounded like he had swallowed a handful of gravel. "Hey yourself, hero," Seren replied. Her lips twitched into a small, tired smile. "You were out for 3 days. I was starting to think you were just napping to get out of paying your bar tab." Arlen tried to laugh, but it came out as a wheeze. He shifted his left arm, and the movement caught his eye. He froze. The ring. It was still on his finger, but it was different. Before, it had been a piece of heavy Lucan silver, etched with the snarling visage of a wolf and sharp, geometric circuitry patterns. It had been a relic of the past. Now it looked like something born of a supernova. The silver had darkened to a gunmetal gray, but the etching had changed. The wolf was still there, but its lines had softened, flowing seamlessly into new patterns, human patterns. Curves and arches that resembled the flight trajectory lines of a starship. The two designs, the Lucan wolf and the human navigator, were no longer separate. They were fused, woven together in a knot of impossible metallurgy. And the light was gone. The fierce, burning white light that had blinded him in the core chamber had faded. Instead, there was a soft, pulsing luminescence deep within the metal, like a dying ember that refused to go cold. It was faint, barely visible, but it was there. "It changed," Arlen whispered, running his thumb over the band. It felt smooth, warm against his skin. Not hot, just warm. "The metallurgists are calling it a symbiotic alloy," Seren said softly, leaning forward. "They say the energy surge melted the molecular structure and reformed it. It bonded with your bioelectric field, Arlen. It is not just an anchor anymore. It is part of you." Arlen closed his eyes, searching inside himself for the familiar tug of the flux. He reached out with his mind, trying to feel the moongate, trying to hear the stars. Nothing. Just silence. "It is gone," Arlen said. He felt a hollow ache in his chest. The Star Warden sense. "I cannot feel the gate." "I know," Seren said. She reached out and covered his hand with hers. Her palm was rough, calloused, and incredibly grounding. "Dr. Cove said the surge burned out your receiver nodes. You are biologically normal now, Arlen. Just a baseline human." "Just a pilot," Arlen corrected, opening his eyes to look at her. "Just a pilot who saved the entire station," Seren said firmly. "Do not belittle it. You traded your superpowers for our lives. That is a trade I will take any day of the week." She squeezed his hand. "Besides," she added, her tone lightening, trying to break the heavy atmosphere, "if you had died, you would have owed me a dinner for eternity. And I plan on ordering the expensive steak, the imported kind. Real cow, not vat-grown protein paste." "I think I can afford a steak," Arlen managed a weak grin. "Though I might have to sell a kidney. Or the ship." "Keep the kidney," Seren said. "We might need it." The door to the medical bay hissed open with a pneumatic swoosh. "Is he awake?" Uncle Jack said. He woke up. Before Arlen could brace himself, a small blur of energy launched itself onto the bed. "Mira," Seren scolded, standing up halfway. "Gentle, he is fragile." But Arlen didn't mind. He grunted as the weight hit his chest, but his arms moved automatically to wrap around the girl. Mira buried her face in his neck, sobbing and laughing at the same time. "You are okay," Mira cried, her tail thumping a frantic rhythm against the side of the bed. "You looked so gray. You looked like the old statues in the plaza." "I am tough, kid," Arlen whispered, patting her hair. "Hard to kill a bad weed." Mira pulled back, wiping her nose on her sleeve. Her golden eyes were bright, swollen from crying, but clear. She looked at him with an intensity that made Arlen pause. "I saw him," Mira whispered. The room went quiet. Seren sat back down slowly. "You saw?" Arlen asked, though he knew. "Daddy," Mira said. "In the dream. When we were holding hands. Before the light went whoosh." Arlen nodded slowly. "Yeah, we all saw him." "No," Mira shook her head. "I mean after that, just for a second. Before I woke up." She climbed off Arlen's chest and sat on the edge of the bed, her legs swinging. She looked serious, possessing a gravity that belonged to someone much older. He told me to tell you something, Mira said. He said you were the most stubborn human in the galaxy. Arlen let out a wet, choked laugh. That sounds like Rhett. And he said, Mira paused, furrowing her brow, as she recalled the exact words. He said you are the only one he trusts to fly the ship when the engine is on fire. He said you are trustworthy. Arlen felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. Trustworthy. It was a simple word, but coming from Rhett after everything Arlen had blamed himself for, it felt like absolution. He also said, Mira added, looking at the ring on Arlen's finger, that the ring fits you better than it ever fit him. Seren made a small noise in her throat, a sound of suppressed emotion. She looked away, staring at the vitals monitor, as if it were the most interesting thing in the universe. Okay, Seren said, her voice trembling slightly. That is enough messages from the great beyond for one morning. Mira, why do not you go find Jax? He is in the waiting room probably trying to hack the vending machine for free tuna snacks. Okay, Mira hopped off the bed. She paused at the door, looking back at Arlen. You are not going to run away again, right? While I am gone. Arlen looked at the girl. He looked at the ring on his hand. The ring that was now fused to him, a permanent scar and a permanent promise. No running, Arlen said. I am grounded, literally, doctor's orders. Mira beamed and ran out. When the door closed, the silence returned, but it wasn't as empty as before. It was heavier, pregnant with things unsaid. Seren turned to him. She didn't look like the fierce engineer or the grieving widow anymore. She looked like a woman trying to solve a puzzle that terrified her. Arlen, she said quietly, we need to talk about the ring. The real reason Rhett gave it to you. He gave it to me to stabilize the gate, Arlen said. We know that. That was the mechanical reason, Seren corrected. But Rhett was a Lucan. We do not do things for just one reason. We are a people of ritual, of layers. She took a deep breath, her hands clasping together in her lap. While you were sleeping, I had the elders look at the logs, the energy signature of the ring. Arlen, before the accident, Rhett performed a ritual. It is called the Ethel Vora, the vow of the second shield. Arlen frowned. I do not speak High Lucan. What does that mean? It is a patriarchal transfer, Seren explained, her eyes locking onto his. In Lucan culture, if a father knows he is going into a battle, he might not survive. He designates a successor. Not a replacement, a backup. Someone to stand in the doorway and keep the cold out. Arlen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He designated me. The ring is the seal, Seren said. By giving it to you and by you wearing it technically, legally, and spiritually, under Lucan law, you accepted the role of protector. Guardian. She hesitated, then said the word. Pack leader. Arlen stared at the ceiling. The irony was crushing. He had run away from his marriage because he felt inadequate, because he feared he couldn't handle the intensity of a Lucan family. And Rhett, knowing Arlen was running, had essentially signed the deed to the house over to him. He knew, Arlen whispered. He knew I was leaving. And he knew you were scared, Seren said. But he also knew who you were at your core. The guy who stays when the engine is on fire. He bet on that guy. He bet his legacy on that guy. Arlen looked at his hand. The fused metal gleamed dully. Mira's question from the cafe echoed in his mind. Why do you wear my dad's ring? It wasn't just a question of ownership. It was a question of identity. So, Arlen said, his voice shaky, I am what stepdad by magical contract. Something like that. Seren gave a small, watery smile. The elders say the bond is sealed. The ring changed because Mira accepted you. You accepted her. The circuit is closed. Arlen sat up, groaning as his stiff muscles protested. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. I am a cargo pilot, Seren, he said, looking at his bare feet. I live on a ship that smells like old socks and ozone. I drink cheap coffee. I am a mess. I am not Rhett. Good, Seren said fiercely. I do not want Rhett. I had Rhett. He was wonderful and he is gone. If you try to be him, I will punch you. She stood up and moved between his knees, forcing him to look at her. I do not need a hero, Arlen. We have had enough heroes. Heroes die. Heroes leave widows and orphans. She reached out and touched his face, her thumb brushing his cheekbone. I need a partner. Mira needs someone who will show up, someone who will teach her how to fly without crashing and how to apologize when she messes up. We need Arlen. Arlen leaned into her touch. It felt like coming in from a long spacewalk. I can do Arlen, he whispered. I have had 42 years of practice. I am getting okay at it. Okay is a start, Seren smiled. She leaned in, and for a moment Arlen thought she was going to kiss him. His heart rate monitor beeped faster, betraying him. But she just pressed her forehead against his, a Lucan gesture of shared breath and shared burden. Welcome home, pilot, she whispered. 2 weeks later, the transition from disgraced ex-husband to savior of the sector was, in Arlen's opinion, entirely too loud. He couldn't walk down the promenade without someone pointing. Philairi would wave their tails in respect. Draken would puff small smoke rings of greeting. Even the Nixari, usually aloof, would give him polite nods. It was mortifying. Arlen adjusted his collar, trying to hide his face, as he walked quickly toward the maintenance sector. You know you could just wave back, Jack said, trotting alongside him. The Philairi was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that made him impossible to ignore. They think you are a demigod. Embrace it. Ask for free appetizers. I am not a demigod, Jax, Arlen grumbled. I am a guy who got electrocuted and lost his superpowers. I am less Thor and more guy who stuck a fork in a toaster. Details. Jax waved a dismissive paw. The point is, the hollow howl is gone. The station feels lighter. Have you noticed the air tastes less like anxiety? It was true. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over Lumenspire for years, the subtle undercurrent of tension between the species, had dissipated. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments and petty crimes. But the supernatural edge was gone. The Moongate hummed its gentle C major chord again, stable and clear. Speaking of anxiety, Jax grinned, checking a datapad. I have an update on the pool. What pool? The betting pool. When will Arlen hold Seren's hand in public? Arlen stopped walking. You have a betting pool. Oh, it is huge. The engineering department is heavily invested. Currently the odds favor next Tuesday. But the bartenders at the Silver Steam are betting on never he is too awkward. I have 50 credits on today. You are a parasite, Jax, Arlen said, shaking his head. I am an entrepreneur, Jax corrected. Also, you are late. They are waiting. They turned the corner into the commercial plaza. And there they were. Seren and Mira were sitting at an outdoor table at the Silver Steam Cafe, the same table where this entire mess had started. Seren was out of her flight suit for once. She was wearing a simple tunic and trousers, in deep green, her hair loose. She looked relaxed, younger than she had in years. Mira was bouncing in her seat, waving frantically when she saw Arlen. Arlen felt that familiar panic, the urge to run, the fear of not belonging. But then, he felt the ring on his finger. It was warm, a steady, reassuring warmth. He took a deep breath and walked toward them. You are late, Seren said, as he approached, though her eyes were smiling. I was about to eat your croissant. I was waylaid by my fan club, Arlen said, pulling out a chair. Jax is trying to monetize my trauma. Standard operating procedure, Seren agreed. Mira pushed a menu toward him. Arlen, look, they changed the menu. It has pictures now. Does it? Arlen looked. Indeed, the holographic menu now had static images alongside the shifting text. Well, that is helpful for us simple folk. The Filari barista Kale appeared at the table. He looked at Arlen with a mixture of respect and his usual disdain. Pilot Shaw, Kale said. Your usual ore has fame changed your palate. Just the cocoa Kale, Arlen said, and put it on my tab. Actually, Kale twitched an ear. The manager says your money is no good here. Lifetime supply, on the house. Arlen's jaw dropped. Serious? Do not get used to it, Kale warned. If you start ordering the expensive pastries, we will renegotiate. I will take a croissant, Jax yelled from the next table where he had settled to watch. Put it on the heroes tab. No, Kale said flatly. Pay for your own fish grease, monkey. As the drinks arrived, the atmosphere at the table settled into a comfortable rhythm. It was a mirror of that first meeting, but the distortion was gone. The tension was gone. Mira sipped her moondust cocoa, getting foam on her nose. She looked at Arlen, then at Seren. So, Mira said, setting her cup down, we are going to the hangar later, to see your ship. Yeah, Arlen nodded. The driftwood needs a tune-up. I thought you might want to learn how to calibrate a sublight thruster. Mira's eyes went wide. Really, Mom never lets me touch the thrusters. Because you are 10, Seren said dryly. And thrusters are dangerous. Arlen will supervise, Mira argued. He is trustworthy. Dad said so. Seren laughed. It was a genuine, full-throated laugh that made heads turn. Okay, fine. But if you blow up the docking bay, it is coming out of his allowance. Do I have an allowance? Arlen asked. Figure of speech, Seren winked. Arlen looked at them. He looked at the steam rising from his cocoa. He looked at the busy promenade of Lumenspire, the spinning ring world that was no longer a cage but a home. He realized he wasn't thinking about the past. He wasn't thinking about the divorce papers or the accident. He was thinking about whether he had a spare flight suit small enough for Mira. Seren reached across the table. Her hand rested on the metal surface palm up. An invitation. Arlen glanced at Jax, who was watching intently from the next table, practically vibrating with greed over his bet. Arlen rolled his eyes. He reached out and took Seren's hand, her fingers interlaced with his. The cool metal of the anchor ring pressed against her skin. It felt right. It felt like a circuit closing. Pay up, losers, Jax shouted to the confused patrons around him. Daddy needs a new capacitor. Seren shook her head, smiling at Arlen. We are going to have to ban him from family outings. Family, Arlen repeated the word. It didn't taste like ash anymore. It tasted like cinnamon and possibility. They finished their drinks in the easy silence of companionship. When they stood up to leave, the artificial afternoon cycle was beginning to dim, casting the spire in twilight hues of purple and gold. They walked out of the cafe and onto the observation deck that overlooked the moon gate. The gate was beautiful, a perfect circle of obsidian framed by the gentle rhythmic pulse of the lunar flux. It was no longer a screaming vortex. It was a lighthouse. Mira ran ahead to the railing, looking down at the moon below. It is sleeping, she whispered. Yeah, Arlen said, coming up beside her. Seren stood on his other side, her arm brushing against his. It is sleeping, no more bad dreams. Mira turned around. She looked up at Arlen, then at Seren. She grabbed both of their hands. So, Mira asked, her voice small but hopeful. Are we a pack now? Arlen looked at Seren. He saw the future in her eyes. Not a perfect future. There would be arguments and bills and messy emotions. But it was a future he didn't want to run from. He looked down at Mira. If you want us to be, Arlen said. I do, Mira said decisively. But I get to be the alpha on Tuesdays. Negotiable, Seren said. But you still have to clean your room. Deal, Mira grinned. They turned to walk toward the hangars. The path ahead was long, winding through the metal spine of the station. Arlen paused for a second. He looked at his left hand. The ring glinted in the starlight. The silver wolf and the human lines were inseparable now. He thought about Rhett. He thought about the ghost in the machine, and the man who had stayed behind so Arlen could walk forward. Fly safe, pilot. Roger that, Arlen whispered to the empty air. He shoved his hands into his pockets, felt the weight of his datapad and his keys, and quickened his pace to catch up with his pack. "Hey," Arlen called out. "Wait up, who is going to carry the toolbox?" "The one with the allowance," Mira shouted back, laughing. Arlen smiled a real, unbroken smile and followed them home.